Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this panel. Sanjay, Accenture conducted an extensive research study to discover how companies are, responding to India's rural markets. Let's synthesize those findings first for everyone.
Rural markets are becoming more and more important for corporate India. And the reason for that is that if you look at the rural GDP, today only 25% of that is really agriculture. The balance is services and industry. So in that environment, and also in difficult times, companies are looking at newer avenues, newer markets. And so rural India really comes to the fore. Rural India is also growing faster than urban India, albeit over a small base. So what we found is that there are four kinds of companies. There are the new entrants, they're just flirting with rural India. There are the performers, the rural performers who've been there and executing over the years. There are new companies which are coming in with disruptions, which we are calling the rural voyagers. And finally, there is the rural master. That's the company which is scaling fast. It is profitable in rural India, and also a large part of their business comes from rural India. And the biggest challenge we found in rural India is sales and distribution. And so what this study really talked about is what does it take to be effective in rural India in terms of reaching, acquiring, and then retaining.
I'm going to focus on the experiences that the panel has had. We're going to dissect everything you just said, Sanjay, and I'm hoping that there's going to be some difference of opinion. But first, let me conduct a quick poll. There's growing business confidence in rural India, in rural Indian markets. Do any of you disagree? And what do you think are the factors for this growing business confidence, if you agree? Mr. Sadashivan, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think rural marketing no longer is a fashion statement. I think it's absolutely a necessity for most companies. And let me take the cement example. I think we've been in rural markets for a very long time. But let's say the 2008 slowdown is what really triggered a very, very focused approach as far as our company is concerned. And also let me give you some imperatives of the cement market. You see, because ultimately cement is a product which is manufactured in a rural area. You see, our factory is in Sirohi, which is absolutely rural. And considering the high logistics cost of cement, it makes more and more sense for companies to sell as close. It doesn't make so much sense for me to go all the way to Punjab and sell them. So I need to develop the rural penetration, and that's where we have had a very, very focused approach, and I think it's given us very good results.
Okay, so I'm going to take a contra point of view. There are many compelling reasons for you to be in rural Indian markets. But Mr. Zucchi, is there growing business confidence in rural markets? Are you going to give it a thumbs up, and what are the key factors for that growing confidence?
The basic fact is that today the market in rural markets are really growing because we feel people have stopped migrating from the rural side to the metros. There is an income level which is going up thanks to the government initiatives of MREGA and few other, like you just mentioned, about the leather industry being set up in the rural areas. With the last projects of NHI, which is also supporting the overall infrastructure development happening in all the rural side. I think that's a very key point where we have the income is getting bigger and bigger in size. So people are looking at, in our case, trying to acquire new products, categories like durables, mobile phones, which is really helping, and we see a lot of potential coming out of these kind of markets now in future.
We're getting a lot of everyone's on the same page here. Mr. Deshmukh?
First of all, I think there is a lot of awareness about brands. I mean, that's one thing which is that the media explosion which has happened, plus people from rural areas traveling all over the place have made them very aware of all the brands that are there. So that helps consumer non-durable or any consumer product to penetrate out over there. Second, of course, there is disposable income. I mean, everyone mentioned about NREGA or the agriculture income. So there is availability. And the third thing that's really happening is that, there's disposable income. The third thing that's really happening is that there's availability of these products and services within reach. We might not, people might not have reached the absolute rural end of it, but I think within a 15 to 20 kilometer radius, or sometimes maybe a little more, there is availability of these products and services for which there is a demand which has already been created through mass media communication. So that, that's all These are factors that we really feel would drive the rural demand in future. We're very upbeat about it. Yeah.
Optimism, upbeat about rural markets. Neeta? Should we warn them? There might be a somber injection coming through?
I think for the very fact that Sanjay's Accenture report is actually saying 4 key points. If it is not an integral part of your strategy, if it is not an integral part of your sources of gains, if you are not earlier established entity in that geography, then it's a fool's gold for you. It is still fashionable to talk rural, and I keep asking people wherever I meet, please define rural, right? Because trying to establish sales and distribution models, trying to even try and look at the last mile servicing, after sales service, hub and spoke, outsourcing, centralized training, it is such a huge ask on your bottom lines that if you're not going to be clear about where your growth is going to come from, and you're just following a bandwagon, then trust me, don't walk into rural, because there's enough demand in 50,000 up pop strata. Follow the infrastructure, follow the roads, follow the postal system, follow the telecommunication system, and you've got business out there. So yes, I will be cautious, and I'm glad that the Accenture report is very clearly talking about organization structures, a part of your significant strategy. You should be able to do demand estimations, you should be able to managing price, you have to really be thorough on sales and distribution. Forget brand management. Totally forget marketing. This is not a marketing game, this is not a brand management game, this is hardcore sales and distribution game.
Which is why we're going to spend a lot of time talking about sales and distribution here on this panel. But Mr. Bedi, you have a bird's eye view, a vantage point with India Post. Neeta's referred to the obstacles. You know, what are some of the key challenges that you see for companies eyeing rural Indian markets?
We have 1,30,000 bases in rural areas. I can say they are retail outlets. And definitely right now there is so much of exposure in the rural areas, through communication, information, that people know there is a product existing, but how to get to that product, that is a problem. So the producers of goods and services, for them, it is out there, they really can come, they can capture a huge big market. And then there is another mantra which is called inclusion. So everybody is looking out now for rural inclusion. So whether it be government schemes, government disbursements, rural market is there, whether it be insurance, whether it be opening of bank accounts. But what really matters and what really ticks in the rural scenario is that yes, there has to be a contact point, there has to be a base. It could be brick and mortar, but no, a person can go around even on a bicycle and let people know that this is what he is there for.
We all know that there is an opportunity, well, most of us agree, and there are also challenges, as has already been placed on the table. But the somber thought is this, Sanjay, which is that companies with a profitable presence at scale are still in a minority. Summarize some of the key challenges, Sanjay.
So I'd start with sales and distribution as the key challenge, and that's something that came out even in our research. It's the last mile connectivity. So automotive company trying to open their own retail outlets or dealerships is probably not the best way to reach rural India. You need to leverage established players like India Post, or for that matter, petrol pump stations like IOCL, HPCL, BPCL. They've got space, you've got to leverage that. So what do you do for the last mile connectivity, I think is very crucial in a rural context. There's 3 other things I would point out is, which is really a subset of the sales and distribution, is how do you actually acquire the consumer? Because there is groupthink in a rural context.
And you need to win over that group.
You've got to break in. So how you break in, I think that's one key challenge. The second is, having broken in, how do you actually ensure that you've truly acquired that particular consumer? So what are you offering? And finally, it is about how do you retain? Because again, there's groupthink, and there'll be others trying to challenge that groupthink. So how do you retain the customer? So I think it's really about that: reach, acquire, retain.
What do you think, Anisha, is the biggest challenge?
One thing, where I disagree with Neeta is on the brand piece, because I think trust is a big challenge in rural India. How do you earn trust? Building brand is important from a trust factor. Lifebuoy, when they wanted to go to rural India, the way they built trust is hygiene is a big issue. So what they did was they actually got people to educate on why hygiene is important and why washing hands is important, and thereby they earn the trust, and thereby they got Lifebuoy to get seeded in. Now, is that branding? Yes, it is. Is it branding via educating consumers? Yes, it is. So we have to find interesting, innovative ways of educating customers, okay? And brands are built via that route. So that's the aspect of brand and earning trust. This is just one example, but multiple ways in which you can earn trust. An automobile player, I was in an automobile company before this, went to a Gurudwara Granthi, because religion is a big thing in a village in Punjab, and they actually got him, to put in a good word. And that's how, 4,000 people who were actually in a Gurudwara on that Sunday actually got, interested in that automobile brand. So those are interesting ways of, earning trust, and therefore brands finding their way and acceptance with consumers.
I'm torn whether to go to Neeta straight away because she's shaking her head. Anirudh, who's semi-agreeing.
No, I just want to completely support Isha's point of view, which is that unless you have a brand which is powerful, trustworthy enough, sales and distribution can just make the product available. But unless there's an over-empowering demand for that product, in fact, what we found is that demand sometimes will create its own supply and distribution channel, because if there is a strong enough demand, the product will reach out over there. So that's one. But coming back to the other points, as to some of the other challenges which are there, I think the top management commitment to getting into rural areas absolutely needs to be there. It's just not a very localized activity that needs to be there, because a lot of investments go into it, a lot of time goes into it. I mean, ultimately, we all have to visit all these places which, where you go to set shops or any of these things. So that's important. And the other important part, as far as from a retail perspective, because I'll speak more from a retail perspective, is what's your channel, who's your channel partner over there, and how reliable is the channel partner? Because, if the channel partner is not very reliable, and if it is okay if it happens in one place, in two places, but when you get over 50, 60 places and you don't have reliable channel partners, you just can't go and try to file cases over there or take back the stocks. It just doesn't work that way. So that's another very important factor that we're finding, or the challenges as far as coming into the rural areas.
Well, we're going to
focus is very important.
Okay, we're going to focus on the solutions as well. So don't get disappointed just yet. But Neeta.
So one of the biggest challenges, and taking on from where Sanjay left, is demand forecasting, and a consistent demand forecasting, price elasticity, setting up price points. These are the two serious challenges once you've entered rural. You don't walk in assuming you own trust. You do not walk in. You don't even walk in to say, I will build trust. And that's when they throw you out. You first walk in like anybody else in their house. You walk in to say, who am I, what am I, where am I, what can I do for you and your community? Let's work together, let's be together, and then let's see how the relationship goes. Because they want to see sustainability in you. They want to see consistency. If somebody is going to talk about Lifebuoy, which Tanisha has, it's a 45-year-old brand. For 45 years, it has taught not just rural, but us Indians and us urbanites how to wash hands.
So that's exactly,
right.
That's exactly the point.
The point is, this is
leveraging the brand power.
You must
and customizing it
Anisha,
to what is needed in the local market.
There is the gestation period. You have to, of course, trust will come. But you cannot say because I've blasted above the line, because...
No, so brand is not advertising. I'm very categorically not making a statement about advertising. I'm talking about building a brand and why brand is important.
So build it, but don't jump to trust, because understand that the rural audience is constantly in a state of trial.
I feel that one of the most important thing in the rural market is to manage this complex ecosystem, which consists of very diverse elements. You have the customer on one side, you have the a whole set of influencers you really don't even know. I mean, they're the wise men in town, and I think we were just talking of trust. It is not your advertising which is going to create the trust. It is those sarpans, those postmasters, those school teachers. They are the ones who create the trust, So managing that complete ecosystem, we have a complete program of masons. I mean, they are the influencers who finally tell the customer what kind of cement he should use. So complexity is because of this diverse, and unless you manage the whole thing in totality, I think just a campaign or, as somebody said, the marketing kind of gimmicks may not work in the rural market.
Okay, we're going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to ask each one of you to really describe what you have done in rural markets, or what you think you would like to do, ideas and approaches that you're toying with, because we've talked about the challenges, and yet there are solutions. Accenture's research shows that. Let's share some of those solutions with the audience. Mr. Deshmukh.
Yeah, I mean, our approach has been to give whatever product or brand experiences at nearby the doorstep of where the rural consumer is. So over the past 2 or 3 years, in towns which have a population of between 50,000 to 100,000, and actually these towns become the catchment area for a lot of rural consumers. We have set up over 75 exclusive Raymond stores. Now these stores provide the consumers with the brand experience. Now these have been set up in partnership with local people out over there. That's very, very important. Now these people interact with consumers on a fairly frequent basis, and then provide the sort of reinforcement while the brand communication and brand trust is being established over a period of time. But the very fact that this is being done with a local partner out over there reinforces that communication.
Mr. Sadashivan, we're talking about sales and distribution innovations, different approaches. You've alluded to the fact that it's really important and impossible for you to avoid actually in the cement business, but really important for you to invest in the local community. And CSR almost becomes an integral part of the business approach. But what can you share with us as far as your experience is concerned?
See, I think in terms of that last aspect, the customer retention. See, you can do campaigns in the markets and get away, but you have to leave a mark behind, and that's where I think CSR comes in a big way, because that really establishes an ongoing relationship with the village community, and that's where I think we have possibly, in some cases, even CSR has taken a lead, and then the marketing has followed. So I think that's a very key approach that we have always adopted. The other thing is the whole concept of feet on street, because in the rural listing, what we need to do is to have people from the local ITIs, the local listings. I have to have those kind of people who move around, and we sort of make them move in those technical promo vans. So it serves the purpose of both. There's a promo aspect, and there's a technical van which actually has a lab which tests the tube and other things. So he can actually visit sites, and then he's sort of testing the cement and all that. So I think that's the kind of grassroots approach which we have done.
India Post is in hot demand for partnerships, for tie-ups. The experience there, is it again a seamless, hassle-free experience? How does it really work on the ground, these partnerships?
With all the offers for partnering with us, whether it be the Registrar General of India, and 2010, the entire census was handled by us, whether it be Aadhaar card, having the Aadhaar card registration and then distributing the Aadhaar cards. Now, the one thing that is very important is that you have to keep upgrading the skills of your people who are there, people who are selling your products in the rural areas.
Yeah, because the skill set of the India Post employee is now expanding.
And
the demands are.
Yes, because we have to make sure that our spare capacities are being utilized, you see, because our retail outlets in the rural areas, 1,30,000 as I said, we are running them at a subsidy. So we have to make sure that there are enough returns. So for example, the consumer price index, I don't think many of us would be knowing about that, but then that is being done by our postmasters. So we have to train them for that. Then we have to tweak and fine-tune our products in such a way that now the government disbursements are at such a large level. There are 121 disbursements that are coming our way apart from NREGA and all the social pensions. So we have to see to it that we bring in technology, because at the doorstep, I mean at the last mile, as somebody was saying, if we do not have handheld devices which take biometrics, which take out a receipt and say that, okay, now this is the money which is left in.
And you're doing this already?
We are doing.
Or you're piloting?
No. Yes, we have already piloted it, and now we have to go in on an expansion mode. And we have we also have these mobile money orders. So we have to keep fine-tuning our products.
It's a constantly evolving process.
Yes,
That's what you're
absolutely.
saying. Final thoughts. A recap perhaps of the ground that we have covered, but we've crisscrossed. I want each of you to focus on the key enablers for companies to achieve scale, profitable scale in rural areas. Who would like to go first, or should we do this in seating order?
See, I think one of the key enablers, and I think that comes out in the Accenture report also, is the organization structure. I think the whole problem sometimes with companies is that they try to duplicate the structure what they have for the other markets into the rural, and I think that possibly is a pitfall which needs to be avoided. I mean, you cannot possibly have a rural market network sitting in Delhi or sitting maybe on state headquarters. It needs to be possibly at a factory location which is rural centric. So I think that's the whole approach, and as I said, and linked to that is the whole process of manning, skill development, because that so fundamentally the structure and then the whole focus, I think, will shift the moment this realignment takes place, and I think that's one.
Mr. Vedi.
Yes, I think the greatest enabler is partnership, whether it be the production is in non-rural areas and the sales and distribution is in the rural areas, or whether the production is in the rural areas and the sales happen in the other areas. So basically it is partnership. You have to get one of the major players in that system and then build along.
The most important part is skill development, which has to happen in those places which is still really far away. The org structure has to be quite different to what we have in the metro stations today. It should more, I would say, like somebody said, interpersonal skills have to be developed to create a customer base where you can attach to your kind of product solutions. And of course, as she just said, about partnerships have to be leveraged somewhere to bring the cost down and probably go with some good partnership arrangement to really reach out to this customer somewhere.
Mr. Deshmukh, key enablers.
Yeah, so given that the brand is there, I mean brand awareness and brand trust that is there, assuming that that's a given, then it's essentially, I think, top management commitment and your local channel partner. These would be the local channel partner would probably be the number one enabler.
I'd go back to two. I'd completely agree with you to say it's sales and distribution and organization structures. Once you get that going, then the product innovations, partnerships are byproducts of that. But you need to go with these two first.
Adisha?
So I think long gestation period, patience and a long-term view.
Sanjay?
I think one is just broadly talent. We talked about skill. I think it's very important that you approach your talent strategy very differently in rural India. It can't be the same compensation structures, it can't be the same organization structures, it can't be the same kind of skill development. So I'd say the broad talent strategy is something that needs to be thought through, and it can't be like it's an urban, often. Technology, I think we didn't talk about technology. I think Nisha did reference it in the context of mobile and mobile health, but I think even broader technology leverage like geographical information systems, or for that matter even mobiles being used for sending reporting aspects on a daily basis.
But Mr. Vedi talked about handheld devices which are performing multiple functions at India Post.
And the last I'd say is senior management buy-in, and it's senior management on rural streets. So it's not just about, from the ivory tower supporting it.
Anirudh said he raised his hand and said, that's what we do.
Yeah. So that is something which is very, very crucial and important.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Great talking to each one of you.